And on that note, the big news of the day is guess who crawled from under his rock, apparently, and sent me a full-blown lawsuit. Yes, Brian Harpole. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that would grant me, your girl, the power of subpoena.
So Candace Owens just got hit with a 69-page lawsuit from Brian Harpole, and it might actually backfire spectacularly. If this goes to discovery, she gets subpoena power to force depositions from everyone who's been dodging questions about the Trump assassination attempt. Let's break down why this could blow the whole thing wide open.
The lawsuit itself is 69 pages, and for some unknown reason, he begins the lawsuit, and I'm talking like the first few pages, with strong support for Israel. I guess that's mandatory.
That mandatory Israel disclaimer is becoming standard operating procedure in political lawsuits now. It's strategic positioning, establishing credibility with certain audiences before making your case. But it's telling when your defamation lawsuit needs geopolitical virtue signaling to seem legitimate.
Guilty as charged. Guilty as charged. I think the moon landing was fake. I'm not sure what this has to do with anything, if I'm required to believe the moon landing is real, but he just kind of mentions that.
The moon landing reference is classic character assassination. Throw in unrelated conspiracy beliefs to make everything else seem equally ridiculous. It's a legal strategy to poison the well, but it's completely irrelevant to whether specific claims about Harpole's whereabouts were defamatory.
But he comes out and kind of makes this obscure argument that he is a private citizen. Okay, that's point 29. He's trying to assert that he is a private citizen. Now, let's take a look at this. Despite 2 podcast appearances, Harpole remains a private individual and not a limited purpose public figure.
This private citizen claim is crucial. Under New York Times v. Sullivan, public figures must prove actual malice, that the defendant knew statements were false or acted with reckless disregard for truth. Private figures only need to prove negligence, a much lower bar.
That's because he doesn't want to have to meet the actual malice standard, right? You're a public figure, you have to meet the actual malice standard, meaning you have to prove that I knowingly published something that was false, and that I did it and acted in total disregard to the truth. I knew what the truth was, and I said, I don't care, I'm going to publish this. It's a hard standard to meet.
The actual malice standard from Sullivan was designed to protect robust political debate. Public figures chose the spotlight, so they accept higher scrutiny. It requires proving the defendant acted with knowledge of falsity or reckless disregard, nearly impossible to establish without smoking gun evidence.
The rule is that private citizens can indeed become limited purpose public figures when they voluntarily thrust themselves into the forefront of a particular public controversy to influence its outcome. In such cases, they are considered public figures only for the context of that specific issue and for a limited time. That's exactly what Brian Harpole did.
The Supreme Court established in Gertz v. Welch that you can become a limited-purpose public figure by voluntarily injecting yourself into a public controversy. Going on major podcasts to defend yourself absolutely qualifies. Harpole thrust himself into this debate.
He is saying that the reason he went on Sean Ryan was because of me. That is beyond, okay? Let's look at this point 28. On November 17th, after Owens and other conspiracy theorists had already implicated Harpole and his team in the assassination, Harpole appeared on the Sean Ryan show solely to respond to and to rebut the defamatory statements. I'm sorry, what?
Here comes the smoking gun that destroys Harpole's entire timeline argument. If he's claiming he only went public because of her coverage, but the dates don't match up, his whole causation theory collapses. This is where lawsuits often fall apart.
That's going to be a tricky one to prove in court, considered I never once mentioned Brian Harpole on my show until after he went on Sean Ryan. Literally, not once did I mention Brian Harpole's name on my podcast. I mentioned his name 2 days after he went on Sean Ryan, and it was in direct response to his disastrous appearance on Sean Ryan. His appearance was on November 17th. The first time I mentioned him on this show was on November 19th.
This timeline evidence is devastating. If Harpole appeared on Sean Ryan before being mentioned by name, he can't claim he was responding to defamatory coverage. He voluntarily entered the public discourse, making himself a limited-purpose public figure under established precedent.
I did not believe the early conspiracies against Brian Harpole. Okay, not only that, I went through great lengths to defend both Brian Harpole and Dan Flood without mentioning their names, because I didn't want the public to find them, when all the early conspiracies started flying. Specifically, the conspiracies were about hand signals. You remember? Frank Turk's doing hand signals. It looks like Dan Flood's doing hand signals. It looks like Brian Harpole is doing hand signals behind his back, and they're all looped in. I didn't believe it. I genuinely didn't believe it.
This completely undermines the lawsuit's portrayal of reckless conspiracy promotion. The evidence shows careful fact-checking and defense of the security team. It's the opposite of actual malice. It demonstrates responsible journalism trying to separate truth from speculation.
That very same day in September, on this podcast, I defended the security team and Dan Flood and said that they were good people. Here are my words. I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories floating in about the security guard and people thinking he was making gestures. I know that security person. He's a good guy. It would shock me. I usually get a vibe about somebody. Not that guy. Not the guy that they say he's like rolling up. He tends to do that, roll up his sleeves. I don't buy that one, okay?
These contemporaneous audio recordings are litigation gold. They prove she was actively defending the security team in September, months before the alleged defamatory statements. This evidence directly contradicts the lawsuit's core narrative about her motivations and intent.
Okay. It feels like he's kind of trying to pull the Blake Lively. He wants to make the claim that he's not a public figure. And that's specifically because a large chunk of his claims are pertaining to Mitch Snow, who he is also suing, by the way. And what is not helpful to his claims to sue me and Mitch Snow is the fact that I reached out to Brian Harpole personally before I featured Mitch Snow on this podcast.
The Blake Lively reference is perfect, claiming victim status while actively courting publicity. But reaching out for comment before publishing shows textbook journalistic ethics. Good faith efforts to verify information demonstrate the exact opposite of actual malice.
So I reached out to him before we hosted Mitch Snow to get his fuller story and to say, hey, you're welcome to tell me that you just weren't there. Like, what's up? We don't have to, like, I don't want to host this guy. Like, why are you being all weird? I asked him then beyond that if he wanted to clarify anything. I sent Brian Harpole, I think a total of 4 messages, and I also sent Dan Flood a message.
Multiple outreach attempts prove she was following proper journalistic standards. When you're trying to verify claims before publishing, that's the gold standard for responsible reporting. This evidence of due diligence completely destroys any actual malice argument.
I sent him, he just didn't answer. So why? Why didn't Brian Harpole simply respond? Why didn't you send a cease and desist a long time ago? Why did you ask me for a retraction? Here's another one. Hey, Brian, reaching out again to see if you'd be willing to speak about the morning of the 9th. I'm obviously not trying to do anything other than debunk Mitch so I can pivot and refocus the investigation, but I oddly cannot get you to confirm or deny if you were there. He's acknowledging he received these messages and he chose not to respond. Again, why? Oh, lucky for us, he's going to explain it in the lawsuit. And this is the wildest point of all.
Offering to debunk claims if they were false is the smoking gun against actual malice. Why would someone seeking to spread defamatory lies offer to correct the record? His silence now seems strategic rather than protective of his reputation.
Her repeated texts to Harpole to get him to respond to the defamatory conspiracy theories that she had been promoting present a cynical attempt to profit from a situation that she had manufactured. By spreading defamatory lies about Harpole and then cajoling him to give her the exclusive content of a response, she stood to profit from increased attention and viewership to her platform at Harpole's expense. So he didn't reply with a yes or no because he didn't want to give me an exclusive yes or no, because then I would have made money on my platform.
This profit motive argument is absurdly weak. Journalists make money from exclusive content. That's literally how media works. Using this logic, no reporter could ever seek comment without being accused of cynical profiteering. It's a nonsensical legal theory.
We're supposed to believe that's the reason? What, are we born yesterday? That's the reason? You didn't want me to make money? So you said, I'm just going to be so stressed out, I'm never going to say anything to her. This is in December. I'm actually going to wait until April. And then in April, I'm going to say, I'm just filing a lawsuit. I'm just filing a lawsuit. That doesn't ring true.
The 4-month delay between alleged defamation and lawsuit filing suggests this isn't about immediate reputation damage. If someone was truly being defamed, they'd act quickly. Waiting until April suggests careful calculation rather than urgent legal necessity.
Well, you certainly lied by severe omission by not letting the viewers know that the text messages that you were presenting on Sean Ryan were not between you and the UVU police chief Long, right? Like when people were going, why didn't you secure the rooftops? You presented this text chain as if it was yours. In fact, you explicitly say the implication being that this is the reason I did not secure the rooftops. This text message is the reason. Take a listen to what he said.
On Monday before, this correspondence went to Chief Long. Hello, Chief Long. We received this message today from the student group. There is a student roof access pretty close to where CK will be set up at the Utah Valley. The Sorensen Center has a couple of staircases that go up to walkway.
Misrepresenting whose text messages they were is incredibly damaging to credibility. If Harpole presented someone else's communications as his own to justify security decisions, that's potentially fraudulent misrepresentation. It undermines his entire Sean Ryan testimony.
And I have seen over and over again examples of people filing lawsuits as PR strategies. I lived that with the Kim Klacik lawsuit. I said, she was a former stripper, blah, blah, blah. She said, I am not. So she files this lawsuit and then says, this is proof that it's not true because I'm filing a lawsuit. And people then started, oh, well, it must be true. She's filing a lawsuit. So, and then what ended up happening was she took it to discovery and then she folded, right? She folded and wanted to sign an agreement and say, let's walk away and not talk about it. When we started presenting the evidence of the strippers that worked with her and knew her, it was like, okay, actually, this was just meant to be a PR thing, actually.
This follows a predictable pattern of lawsuits as reputation management. File suit to create headlines, then quietly settle when discovery starts revealing uncomfortable evidence. The Kim Klacik example shows how these cases collapse under actual scrutiny.
Well, I obviously just received this lawsuit a couple of hours ago, and I am not therefore at liberty to assert what we will or will not do because I have to speak with my husband, and I haven't had the time to, formally plead my case with him, so to speak. But what I will say is, how many opportunities are we going to have? Are we ever going to have another opportunity to force depositions? Are we ever going to have an opportunity to have the power of subpoena?
This could be the best thing that happened to the investigation. Discovery rules work both ways. If Harpole wants to litigate, he opens himself up to depositions and document production. Subpoena power could finally get answers people have been avoiding.
Is this the only plausible path that we will have before us to get Erika Kirk to sit for deposition? To answer basic questions that we've been asking for actually a very long time. If that's the claim that you are making regarding there being no conspiracy, is the power of subpoena actually going to be our only way?
Erika Kirk has been notably absent from public questioning, despite being central to the timeline. Subpoena power could force depositions from everyone in Trump's inner circle that day. This lawsuit might accidentally break open the very investigation it's trying to stop.
Charlie Kirk is dead. We have been told a lot of lies, a lot of inconsistent stories from the people that are around him. They are, I would say, especially in this last month, there seems to be sort of a ramped up effort to attack people who have been asking for the truth in a reasonable fashion over and over again, extending messages to Brian. Hey, come on the show if you'd like to. I didn't even ask him to come on the show. I said, you could just tell me what the truth is and I'll report on that. And they don't want to do that. You don't jump and skip and then file a lawsuit. That's not normal. That is abnormal. That's not the normal trend.
The timing of this legal offensive suggests coordination. Multiple figures simultaneously attacking investigators rather than simply answering questions indicates a defensive strategy. Normal people with nothing to hide don't lawyer up en masse. They just tell the truth.